Dean Legge and Dylan Weber here. We draw closer to the Sugar Bowl, but I guess really the news of the day, Dylan, was Mark Richt's. I don't know if he's retiring from football. It certainly looks like it.
That's what it said. And you have to think if this is probably his last stop. I don't know where else he would go from here. Coaching at your alma mater, if you're not fired from there, I don't know why you'd leave like that.
Well, leave like that's a good way to put it because I think it's pretty sudden. I don't know that it's stunning that he's not going to be the coach at Miami next year, but Mark did so much at Georgia that when he was having success in his second season in Coral Gables, I was not surprised. What it says to me is a couple of things. Number one, maybe he jumped in too quick. That's totally possible. I would also say Miami has some structural problems that certainly Georgia does not, and maybe a lot of other ACC schools don't, because that conference is about as bad as it gets right now. And that Miami couldn't really get where they had to go with a guy who proved that he could win in a big way at Georgia. I don't know.
I mean, recruiting-wise, too, it's difficult. I mean, just the state of Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about, the structural prowess that Georgia has now, because no one in state is really recruiting against him, Georgia. But for Florida, I mean, you have people coming in out of state recruiting a bunch, but you also have the likes of Florida State, Florida, Miami. I mean, you have a bunch of schools you got to compete with in state.
The Gators right now, just with the beating they put on Michigan. And, today, by the way, too, we had a lot of reaction about what happened in the college football playoff. I mean, as we suspected, Notre Dame is just not good. I mean, they're just not good, and they should not have been in there. Sorry. That's just the truth. Oklahoma played fine, but that was a disaster of a game, that matchup with Clemson. And Clemson's good. Notre Dame is not. What did you think was going to happen?
I mean, I honestly thought it would at least be a little better than that.
I did not.
Clearly. But, wow, yeah, that was – I mean, yeah, like you said, Clemson's good, but
They're not
going in there. They shouldn't be thumping – another playoff team like that.
Right, because whereas Clemson's a playoff team, Notre Dame's not. And, now we're going to hit a week of, well, we knew Clemson and Alabama would get there. Clemson at some stage, has got to have someone in their path. This has got to be one of the easier runs to the college football national championship, maybe since the Nebraska teams in the mid-'90s. I mean, there's just
last Notre Dame team.
Well, at least in 2012 with Notre Dame, yeah, maybe. I mean, that was not a great run either. But, it's got to be that these games before the national championship game matter. I mean, I think Clemson can only do what's in front of them. They can only beat the team that's in front of them. But the teams that are in front of them are just not good.
Yeah. I mean, once again, this is just becoming a beatdown of the ACC.
We can move on. And the Georgia kids today, you could tell Claude Felton had gotten in their ear today.
Yeah, Terry, I think he was asked 5 times while I was sitting there, just, what'd you think of last night? What'd you think of last night? What'd you think of last night? And he just kept saying, oh, well, they put the best teams in there. And he was he's smiling, shaking his head. And, I mean, of course, these players feel differently, but, it's in the past to them.
Well, and it's in the past, too, but I do want to say one more thing. The television numbers came out today for those games last night. 12.5 million fewer people watched those games than last year's games. That matters, or that will matter.
In the SEC championship.
I should. Well, it didn't beat both of them, I don't think. No, but it did beat Clemson, Notre Dame. And when you get back to it, I mean, look, Clemson is not a. Some people not from the South might not know what state Clemson's in. Notre Dame, everyone knows. So sort of understand why Clemson would struggle on a national television scene. There's no excuse for Notre Dame.
Yeah, Notre Dame shouldn't at all. I mean, they have their own private thing with NBC. I mean,
look, some of this is they didn't play it on New Year's Day. Some of it is, this is kind of bullshit. Are these 4 teams really the best 4 teams? And then it just wasn't competitive.
Yeah, it just wasn't a good football game, and so people don't want to watch it if it's not a good football game.
They don't. And the other thing is, too, again, 12.5 million people fewer. That's huge. Georgia, Alabama outperforming a college football playoff semifinal is just, that's wild. That shouldn't happen.
I mean,
they had a month to gussy up promotion for this game, and they did it.
Yeah, it was just
bad.
I don't know. It's not a good thing for the playoffs. It wasn't a good look for them.
No, it's not. I mean, that Georgia Alabama beat out the Cotton Bowl, that Georgia Oklahoma last year beat out the Cotton Bowl, that Georgia Alabama obviously last year beat out the Cotton Bowl. It's looking now, though, that last year's Rose Bowl, a semifinal game, may beat out this year's national championship game. It's possible.
I mean, well, it was one of the best games in college football history. It was
great. But it should not beat out a national championship game in terms of viewership. And the American people can smell a fake. And I think that's another thing that you got to be careful here. You know, if Ohio State were in it, the numbers would be bigger.
It would be different.
It would be much larger numbers for a lot of different reasons. Ohio State's a huge television brand. We're getting closer and closer to Georgia and Texas. Sam, why don't you take it for Sam Ehlinger? You compared him. You talked about his style being similar to Tim Tebow's.
Yeah, and I don't think Georgia fans want to hear that. I think they're kind of past the whole Tim Tebow phase of their lives, but it runs eerily similar. I mean, he likes to run in between the tackles. He doesn't like to slide, and I mean, he will risk his body for an extra 2 yards on a 4-yard run on 2nd and 10, even though it might not matter. He doesn't care. Those 2 yards mean everything to him.
I'm going to go ahead and say that's not a good game plan against Georgia.
Well, the biggest issue is he's really their main running threat. And I'm
going to go ahead and say that's not a good game plan against Georgia as well.
Yeah, that's not good. He has 13 touchdowns, and their running backs both have 3, I think. And that's just, to beat Georgia, you got to be able to run the ball and with your running backs. Right. It can't just be your quarterback.
I think if he can play the best quarterback play we've seen against Georgia this year, really were two guys, the kid at Missouri and the kid at LSU. The kid at LSU played unbelievable.
I mean, that was, and you go back and you look at.
Actually, he didn't play unbelievable, but the run at the end won the game.
I mean, yeah, it's like you look at the stats and they don't look that incredible for Joe Burrow, but I mean, he did, eyeball test looks great. He played well, and that was probably, the best quarterback performance, I would say, of anyone who's played Georgia this year.
It was probably better than Locke. I mean, Georgia, we were sold a bill of goods about Jake Bentley that is becoming harder to believe. And then, you talk about Drew Lock. At Kentucky, they really struggled. Tua, a guy that, that wasn't good.
It wasn't good at all. And
then last night, he's killing Oklahoma. So, Booger McFarland makes his point. I think then you see, Kirk Herbstreit's been, all over Georgia, should have been for a long time. But then last night, the big thing is, too, though, if Georgia, we can talk about this all we want to. If Georgia does not perform against Texas, it's all for naught. All this discussion, all this discussion is all for naught to begin with. But
everyone, who's been saying Georgia should have been in, people like Kirk Herbstreit, they kind of start scratching the back of their necks a little bit because they're like, ugh, okay.
Well, they are a 13-point favorite, which is not insignificant. That's a huge line. And second on top of that is, we're going to have there's some reckoning coming. We've got 3 games in particular that are interesting to me: Georgia, Texas, obviously. LSU, Central Florida?
I think that's actually going to be a better game than I at least first initially thought.
And then obviously Alabama, Clemson. Look, Clemson's got a shot. I thought Oklahoma had a shot, but Oklahoma was really never in that game. It didn't feel like to me. They were always down double digits. Trevor can really play. There's no question, but Clemson needs to go out and really play well. But the way Tua played last night, it looked like pretty normal to me.
Yeah, it looked normal except for that SEC championship game. Right. You think that's probably, maybe not how well he will play against Clemson, but somewhat close. I think we'll see.
Well, if he plays that way, it's going to be hard for Clemson, I think, to win that game. But Trevor is very good. There's no question about that. And Notre Dame is really just not good. All right, Georgia, we'll have Kirby tomorrow. It's been quite a bit of content here lately on Dog Post. Go to dogpost.com and check out everything that we've got there for you. We don't constantly rant about the the inequities of college football. Georgia's benefited in the past, I guess. I don't know when. When did they benefit in the past?
You would know better than I.
They haven't. Okay, so go check out the site, dogpost.com, and we'll see you later from New Orleans.